This is a topic that I've wanted to cover for a while now, as I truly believe it's an issue that needs to start being addressed on a larger scale, especially amongst Catholics. I remember a while back, I was having a discussion with some friends about different forms of government, and naturally, there were some friendly disagreements because, in some ways, you can contend that is a relatively subjective argument. I mean, what difference does it really make what type of government we have as long as our leaders are governing with the right intentions and we have a civil society? So, as Americans, we have grown up in a society that cherishes terms such as freedom, liberty, and just in general, the will of the people. Now, these are terms that are not at all new to humanity, but their current application to present society is certainly somewhat recent when they became especially prevalent following the American and French revolutions. They have become so ingrained in our conscious and subconscious minds that it becomes a horrifying thought for many to ever imagine an existence without them. When you're on the right side or the left, in reality, if you study the great Catholic scholars even just a little, the idea that freedom and liberty are the ultimate beginning and end, and everything should stem off them is un-Catholic and ultimately contradicts natural law and God's law. At the time, I had argued in favor of the Catholic monarchy because, well, that is what the world had been used to seeing up until roughly 250 years ago. The other side of the spectrum was the current republics and democracies that we now have in the majority of the Western world. One of the contentions against my claim that a monarchy, or a Catholic monarchy to be especially exact, was that the world wasn't all sunshine and roses back in the Middle Ages either. There were tyrants in power, there were injustices being inflicted on the people, and plenty of atrocities committed. These are all true, of course. It would be unrealistic and an impossible expectation to hope that a government run by people isn't going to make some brutal mistakes for all of history. The other point made was the advancements of the quality of life we experience now. Never has humanity lived such comfortable lives while simultaneously also not needing to work as hard as we have in the past. Now, these are all valid points, as I conceded back at the time. They are difficult to refute until you stop looking at it from the perspective of what provides the comfiest living. Although that is another point I'd like to address at some point, but for the sake of time, I'll save it for another time. So, as Catholics, the center of our lives is our Lord Jesus Christ. Anything else that is important to us must always come after. It is our duty to make sure that Christ is King and that we answer to him and no one else. This includes the type of government we choose to have for ourselves. The current system we have now is an inversion of the traditional hierarchical system that God has handed down to us. In the absolute sense of a democracy, leaders are elected by the majority or plurality population, in which case they become servants of the people. They answer to the people, but then who do the people answer to? In the traditional sense of authority, the king, queen, or whatever the absolute ruler may be called, they answer to the church, who in turn answer to God. There was a quote from a French monarchist author, Charles Maurras, who stated that something along the lines of, in order for a monarchy to work, one man must be wise. But for our democracy to work, you need a majority of the people to be wise, which is more likely. It really is true, not just in the natural sense, but in the supernatural sense. I personally like my chances a lot more that a monarch who is held accountable by God and the church is more likely to keep himself in line than a population of millions that are given freedom to do whatever they please. It is impossible for Catholics to truly favor a system of religious liberty over one that establishes the Catholic Church as the state religion and the only true religion. Think about it. The Catholic Church is God's church, where we find true salvation, which means we cannot find it in any other religion. Every other religion tries to pull us away from the one true church, which is essentially, and hate to be blunt, but it's essentially the work of Satan, because he doesn't care how we lose our souls as long as we do. Religious liberty gives equal rights to all religions, which means that it gives God the same and equal rights to all false religions and religions and gods. And that doesn't sound right. God should be on the same field as all of these falsities. Now, I went off on a bit of a tangent about religious liberty, but it's a good example to show us that at the very end of the day, God is the truth, and there can only be one truth. He is goodness itself. We can't possibly have a good and virtuous society without him. But advocates of a secular society will say that we can have a good and moral country while we separate church and state, and people can worship or not worship God as they please. Ultimately, though, and Pope Leo XIII stated, "The world has heard enough of the so-called rights of man. Let it hear something of the rights of God." We should be striving for a system that puts God at the top, completely influencing our lives. It's because we owe our lives to God, not to liberty. A democracy puts the wills of the people first, and that is a dangerous and selfish proposal to make. This all has mostly been a point in favor of why we need a government that places God at the top, with different levels of hierarchy given the divine right to govern according to his divine law. And hopefully in the next installment, because I'm running out of time here, I'll be able to delve further into why a monarchy is in particular a better option. But for now, that's all I've got for you today, and I'll see you next time, and God bless.